We will not comply with the institutions, sick illusion. No, we won't be televised. We're welcome to the revolution.
Welcome to the front lines of the MAHA revolution. We are the tip of the spear. MAHA is never going to be perfect, and our fierce, freedom-loving advocates and activists are never going to agree on everything, nor should anyone who believes in science, because, science is messy, it's complicated, it's in constant flux, and we believe more than any other group in the scientific process and in ridding science of corruption, of conflicts of interest, and of the revolving door. This administration is doing more than any other to bring solutions, because the others claimed that everything was working well and that change was just too dangerous. Change is dangerous, but not to you, not to American citizens, not to any of us. Change is dangerous to a corrupt system that has failed the American public, and Americans are angry about that. They know what's happened to them, and they simply won't take it anymore. So here's what we're going to do about it, and here's what we're doing this week. We're going around the country, we're meeting with governors to convince them to push through MAHA laws, MAHA rules, MAHA regulations. We're talking to members of Congress. We're informing the public that 76% of the American public suffers from at least one chronic disease, and that we can do better, that we have to do better, and that we are now finally beginning to do better, because that's what Americans voted for. And that's what Secretary Kennedy and President Trump are going to give them. To that end, we're building momentum, educating the public, anyone who will listen, connecting with and engaging with thousands and thousands of grassroots activists in every state and organizations around the country. We're making videos with people like Jay Carson, who's just an incredible filmmaker and has this great team. We're making movies through our partnership with Jeff Hayes at MAHA Films. We're having roundtables, symposiums, wide-ranging events all across the country. We're working on all fronts to motivate people to take action, to rally the troops, to highlight the incredible successes of Secretary Kennedy and his team and President Trump. And we want every one of you to help. We need every one of you to help. And again, we won't always agree on the details, but we believe so strongly in freedom, in dialogue and debate. And we believe in the general direction of the country. And we're going to fight to maintain that momentum, that incredible progress, all the way through the midterms and into the future. Because Americans voted for a team that promised to challenge the status quo. Because the old team failed the American public. They spent our tax dollars to support policies and companies that destroyed our health. And that is ending now. We're going to make Americans healthy once again. So today we have an incredible lineup of about 15 people who are going to tell you all the things that are going on now, all of their perspectives. And, we're going to start out with Dr. Joe Ladapo. But, just as a sort of a slight short comment, I'd just like to say that we're grateful for all of the different newspapers that wrote stories on us. Some of them were hit pieces, but they highlighted what we're doing. 2 or 3 different places. Ross Story was one of them, and they promoted this weekly media hub in their hit pieces. And as a result of that, we have a record number of more than 8,000 signups, more than 8,000 people, influencers from around the country, listening to this. And we are live streaming through Dr. Drew's platform and through Steve Bannon's War Room. So thanks so much. And please welcome to Cooper Davis. He is the Executive Director of Inner Compass. Thanks so much.
Great. You guys can hear me okay, I presume? Terrific. And thanks for that, Tony. And thanks to MAHA Action for doing this, for having us here today, and for this opportunity to say hi to you all and talk to you a little bit about mental health. So as Tony mentioned, Inner Compass Initiative is a 501c3, of which I am the executive director. And our tagline is that we help people make more informed choices about their mental health, about mental health treatment, and in particular about tapering and withdrawal from mental health treatment. And the reality is, it can be easy to get on psychiatric drugs. These days, it can also be really challenging to come off. And that's an area that we've seen in this administration a little bit more interest than what we've seen in the past, in zeroing in on this particular problem. So our nonprofit, we've been around for a long time, but when the sort of MAHA movement sort of showed up talking about these issues, it was a really exciting moment for us. So I'll be brief because I think there's a lot of great people to get to here, but just in short, we hear a lot about a mental health crisis happening in this country. And I think most people, that's a transpartisan agreement, mental health crisis, there's certainly something going on. But if you drill down a little bit, I think it's worth, questioning that a little bit. So first of all, what do we actually mean when we say mental health? Okay. I can remember a time when that term didn't really exist in the culture the way it does today. And so, but certainly we had these issues. So how did we talk about them? What words did we use to describe these things that now fall in this bucket that we might call mental health challenges or mental disorders, or psychiatric disorders? It's a question worth asking. And so before that phrase existed, people spoke of things like melancholy, grief, alienation, loss of faith, despair, restlessness. There were all kinds of different ways that we were able to discuss with each other these types of experiences that can be really challenging. But nowadays, you have terms like depression, anxiety, or ADHD. As soon as you use one of these more clinical terms, you come up against a pretty hard stop. Okay, you're not necessarily having that opportunity to connect with one another about the experience of being human, which can be really challenging. And so sometimes what we are seeing there when we convert these longstanding human experiences into diagnosable mental conditions, some people might call that medicalization, sort of the process of redefining normal human variation and suffering as a medical disorder. Obviously, there's some pretty obvious incentives we can point to there. If you can define something as a medical problem, you certainly can then sort of pursue medical solutions to that problem. And in many cases, modern medicine can be absolutely miraculous. I mean, this is by far the best time in human history to get in a car accident, no question, right? But in other places, we have some edge cases, and nowhere more so than in the realm of mental health. And certainly when we're talking about children, I think it becomes almost really, really urgent. Not almost urgent, totally urgent, right? And that's so medicalization, that's where grief becomes something like, prolonged grief disorder, major depressive disorder. An energetic child can become ADHD or one of the subtypes of ADHD. Or when I was a kid, I was diagnosed ADD. We added the H. The H was optional. I'm sure there's a doctor on this call who could explain exactly what happened with the H. The point is, we've really complicated this stuff in a particular direction, but we're not necessarily moving towards what you might call mental health. In fact, we probably have more treatment going on than ever before. And yet maybe the scale of the problem is also bigger than ever before. It doesn't feel like we're any closer. I could talk a little bit about my own experience. I'll try and, be brief with it. But I think there's a lot of people out there who can relate to what I went through, which is, in my 20s, I late teens and 20s, I had that ADD diagnosis or ADHD diagnosis, and I pursued treatment from stimulants. And the stimulants actually did me a great deal of good. But of course, you have to play the tape through with this stuff. And taking them, a year, 2 years, 3 years, once I got to 4 years, they weren't working quite as well as they did in the beginning. And I experienced what's known as a prescription cascade, where some of the side effects of those stimulants, I ended up becoming diagnosable conditions for which other drugs were prescribed to me. Benzodiazepines, gabapentinoids, certainly sleep drugs. You have all of these. You're already seeing a prescriber on a regular basis, and who's asking you questions like, "So how's everything going?" One of those appointments, you're going to hit on something that sort of lines up with the diagnostic criteria, and you might end up with another prescription. So in my case, I ended up, more and more of these psychiatric treatments that I was engaging with, all these drug treatments. And eventually I came to the point where I said, maybe I better find out if these are actually helping me or are these actually making things more difficult? And follow me on Twitter if you want to know how that story ended. Or I guess it continues today, but needless to say, my experiences there is what led me to work as the executive director of Intercompass. So in any case, what is it that we do and what am I here specifically to talk about today? Well, the reality is that the Make America Healthy Again movement, it represents a really rare opening for people who've been doing this work for a while. It's the first time there's been a federal framework to acknowledge this concept of psychiatric medicalization and also, put out there on a level that the entire population can see how many people are actually, especially children, are currently engaging in treatments for which we really need to take another look at the evidence base for the safety and efficacy of these treatments. And what the Make America Healthy Again report, which actually, it names this concept of medicalization. I think that this report is inviting us to ask, what if our epidemic of distress that we're calling a mental health crisis right now, what if this is in part a symptom of this medicalization of normal human life? What if that's part of what is fueling the crisis, right? The solution to the crisis itself, or what we've seen it as, what if that is actually driving it? So I think that, this is like the general framework of why we're here and why we're excited to be invited to join this call. And I have, a couple friends and colleagues who are going to be following me to fill in some of the gaps, a little more specificity on this mental health stuff. But I think just like this general flavor of how is MAHA seeking to approach this mental health crisis is really, really encouraging for a lot of us who've been doing this work for a really long time. And we are totally on board and excited to help make sure that this administration and this larger movement outside of government certainly has what it needs and can draw from the incredible work of people who've been doing this for many, many years and really sort of like outlining a plan of attack for when we do get to the point that we can actually kind of address this problem of psychiatric medicalization, with the full force of a population that's sort of like finally getting the message that this is what's going on. And so, yeah, I think I could offer a little introduction for, I think Laura's going to follow me up. And she's going to talk a little bit more specificity about the scale of the psychiatric drug use and in this country and what might be needed to actually start to get that trend line moving in the other direction. And my friend Derek is going to talk a little bit about informed consent, and he's been doing some fantastic work on that. He himself is a veteran who we're grateful for his service to our country, but the veteran community certainly knows a lot about ways in which psychiatric drug treatment can be a double-edged sword. So, I think that's my piece. Tony, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Cooper.
Yeah, thanks.
So next up we have Laura Delano, and she is going to just follow up on what Cooper said. So welcome, Laura.
Thank you, Tony. It's an honor to be here. I'm so, like Cooper said, I'm so excited to be connecting with MAHA, the MAHA Action community about this massive issue of psychiatric medication, diagnosis, and what the consequences have been. So yes, as Tony said, my name is Laura Delano. I founded Intercompass Initiative, the nonprofit organization that Cooper now runs. And what led me to found ICI was my own experiences growing up psychiatrized, as I like to put it. I spent the most formative years of my life as a psychiatric patient on meds, being diagnosed, internalizing these diagnoses as my entire sense of self. I go into that in my book, Unshrunk, and I'm not going to talk about that here, but that's just to contextualize what brought me to this work. It's not that I'm a medical or mental health professional. It's that I'm a former patient, and my expertise on this issue, so to speak, comes from my layperson experience of these issues. And so, as Cooper mentioned, we are in this epidemic level crisis in our country of more people suffering than ever before, at the same time as more people are engaged with some kind of mental health treatment. And just to give some numbers to that, right now, according to the CDC, and a very conservative 4-year-old estimate at this point, there are about 65 million Americans on some kind of psychiatric drug. So that's basically 1 in 4 adults, 1 in 10 kids. These numbers have skyrocketed over the decades, not coincidentally in lockstep with the expansion of the psychopharmaceutical industry and direct consumer advertising and all that comes with that. And so we're really in the midst of a massive social experiment right now, because most of the people on these drugs, and again, that's tens upon tens of millions of us, are on them for not days, weeks, or months, but oftentimes years, despite the fact that there's actually no evidence base for long-term use. And many people are on these multiple of these drugs at a time, despite the fact that these drugs have never been studied in combination with each other. So essentially, we're all guinea pigs here in this long-term psychiatric medication experiment. And for so many of us, myself included, and my parents too, because I was a kid when I was put on these drugs, we weren't meaningfully informed. And Derek will go into that and what that really means. But in my case, my parents and I were not told that using these drugs for weeks, months, years might lead to all kinds of adverse effects, many of which, mimic the diagnoses themselves. So increased emotional struggles, cognitive issues, mental thinking challenges, anxiety, panic, the list goes on. And that certainly happened to me. And because we weren't informed, as I got worse and worse and more dysfunctional, we were being told, Laura's getting sicker. Her illnesses are progressing. And eventually I was even declared treatment resistant because I was on all of these treatments, yet none of them were actually helping me. I just kept getting worse. The other piece that we were not informed about was that using any psychiatric drug for more than a few days can lead to physiological dependence, by which I mean your brain becomes acclimated to this drug, as it does with any repeated use of a psychoactive chemical. And so when your brain becomes dependent on this drug, that makes it really hard to get off of it. And doctors are not informing their patients about this. I think many doctors don't even realize this themselves, maybe for certain drug classes like benzodiazepines. But this is the case for antidepressants, mood stabilizers, stimulants, antipsychotics, all of them. And so what dependence means is that when you try to come off your drug and you do it too fast, you may well actually have a collapse into all kinds of problems, many of which look like the illnesses themselves. What we're told when this happens, you've taken Zoloft for a decade and you realize, maybe I don't need this anymore. You ask your doctor says, oh, cut it in half for a couple of weeks, then stop and you'll be fine. You do that. And what ends up happening is you have increased anxiety, you're not sleeping well, you're more depressed. You go back to your doctor and they tell you, oh, you're having a relapse of your illness, or maybe the onset of a new one. This is why you need your meds. And you go back on them and you feel better. And you think to yourself, oh, these meds are helping me, not realizing that they're actually just the withdrawal symptoms that have abated because you're back on the drug you're dependent on. So we are not being informed this, tens upon tens of millions of us. And what I and Intercompass Initiative and my colleagues are so eager to partner with MAHA Action and the MAHA community on is, what do we do about this? Because right now there are 0 safe off-ramps available in the conventional mental health system for these medications. Doctors are taught how to put people on them, not how to safely taper them off. There are no protocols. There's no continuing medical education on this. And when doctors are thinking that they're tapering properly, they're not realizing they're doing it way too fast. And so what this has meant is that it's been those of us patients who've had to figure out for ourselves how to safely get off of these drugs. And what we're finding is that it doesn't take a few weeks or a couple months. For many people, it can take years of tapering, years. And we have our own layperson protocols that are being adopted in the UK and more increasingly in smaller clinics and individual practices. But our government and trusted mental health authorities have yet to acknowledge this issue and develop safe protocols. This is a serious public health crisis. If a tiny percentage of the 65 million people on these drugs come off too fast, that could be a disaster for them and their families. It's really important that we spread awareness about this phenomenon of dependence and withdrawal and help people understand what tapering actually looks like. And to that end, before I wrap up, I posted an X thread a couple of hours ago, and I would love your help on this call, disseminating it far and wide. The thread breaks down exactly what I just talked about here. And it's my attempt at helping to get this information out there so that families can begin the process of getting properly informed about tapering and find resources on how to do that, and hopefully spread the word about it. My last plug, Intercompass Initiative is having its inaugural conference on this issue and many more issues this December in Connecticut. In my thread, you can find links to that conference. We would love to see you there. So just thank you to MAHA Action for this opportunity. We're so excited to collaborate with all of you in helping the tens upon tens of millions of suffering people get better support and better informed.
Thanks so much, Laura. Yeah, clearly what we need is science, is a government, and it's the kind of government we have now that's going to be geared towards not getting people on drugs, not helping pharmaceutical companies sell more drugs to more people, but to get people off drugs safely, to get people the nutrition that they need, the knowledge that they need to make better choices for themselves, the sunlight they need, the working out, the food, the nutrition, all of it. That's what MAHA stands for, that we want to fight to help people be more healthy, not to have a government and big corporations tell us what we should put into our bodies. So thanks so much, Laura. Next up, we have Rand Paul. And Rand has been such an incredible fighter for medical freedom, for real science, for science that's not in the private interest, but science that really is geared towards helping us. And we're so grateful for the work that he's done. Thanks so much, Rand.
Good afternoon, everybody. Glad to be with you. I was thinking back to the last couple of weeks, and one of the big things we had was the Susan Menares hearing. Some of you may have seen that. She was the disgraced CDC head that was let go, and they brought her back in to rehabilitate her. I don't think she did very well in the rehabilitation hearing, but I was reminded of the first hearing, and sometimes people accuse me of not being a team player. I ended up voting for her, but boy, I had some doubts about her from the very beginning, because the one question I asked her in her confirmation hearing was, do you think it was wrong for Francis Collins to talk about taking down fringe epidemiologists, referring to the current NIH director, Jay Bhattacharya, and other esteemed scientists? And she wouldn't answer the question. She was so sort of a part of the establishment and afraid of Francis Collins or whoever else, friends of Francis Collins, that she refused to condemn it. Most other scientists, when I ask them that question, immediately say it's absolutely wrong, and I would never in my professional career talk about taking down people who I have a professional disagreement with. It really is unprofessional. It's incredibly unprofessional, and she wouldn't answer the question. She finally answered it in public, so I agreed to support her, but I did have misgivings, and then she turned out to be, rotten. So we get her back after she's been let go, and I ask her a few questions, smile, and really never answer the questions, but they're still important questions. And the number one question is, did it show a reduction in hospitalization or death? Well, it's a clear-cut answer. You look at the Pfizer study, it didn't show a reduction in hospitalization and death, and you know why? Because the control group had no hospitalizations or death. So you can't reduce something below zero. So if the control has no hospitalizations, no death, how can you say the vaccine improves? And this became their only real means of showing that there was some kind of effectiveness because they couldn't prove that it prevented transmissibility. This is still important because they're still promoting a COVID vaccine for children. It's ridiculous. Now, I do applaud Secretary Kennedy and the CDC for the committee, the vaccine committee, for changing the recommendations to saying that it would be individually based decisions. And the media, of course, howled. And to me, it was like, oh my goodness, shouldn't all medical decisions be individually based between the doctor talking about risk and benefit and allowing the patient to make a choice? But this is still important because in order to prove a vaccine works, if it doesn't prevent transmission, they try to go to this next step, hospitalization and death. But they couldn't show it in children, so all they could show was that a child would make antibodies if you give it a COVID vaccine. And my response to Fauci and others were, I can give you 100 vaccines. I can inject you with wood and you'll make antibodies to wood. I mean, all that means is that immunology works. It doesn't mean the vaccine is necessary. So when you look at the adult COVID vaccine, they could not show that it prevented transmission, but they used hospitalization and death. Now, I'm not going to argue that point pro or con, but what I would say is we live in a brand new COVID era now. So we have a virus that's much less virulent. It has mutated to become less and less virulent with each year. But we also have a community that's had increasing immunity. So we have increased immunity, decrease. So my question is, why don't we repeat that test again? If you're going to tell me it's a good idea, I'm not quite 65, I'm 62, but let's say I'm 65 and you tell me it'd be advisable to take the COVID vaccine, well, why don't you show me that a booster is not going to reduce transmission? Show me that it reduces hospitalization and death. I think we're going to run into the same problem we had with children. Virtually nobody's going to the hospital and virtually nobody's dying right now. My little brother's a family doctor. He said he hadn't seen a patient in the hospital or die in the last 2 years. And he did see them in 20 and 21. So the question is, before we spend, inconvenience people and enrich Pfizer and Moderna a lot for telling people over 65 to take it, let's get the statistics. So I've been advocating, and I've sent a letter to the acting head of the CDC. Let's crunch the data. The government has more data than anybody else, and let people know. If it helps us, let us know. If we're not positive, let us know that too. But we have a lot of people who are like sheep, and they just go in and take the vaccine, and millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars are generated. If they are, the other side's always saying, pay attention to the science, follow the science. Well, let us know what the science is on whether or not we should get a booster. One other thing I'd like to mention. One other thing. I try to stick to, I don't know everything about every vaccine, and I don't know that everyone has appropriate conclusions about every instance of whether you should or shouldn't. So I stick to the things I know, and I know two things. There's no indication for your child to take a COVID vaccine, and there's no indication, and it may well be more harm than good. I think that's justifiable. And the hepatitis B vaccine, there's no reason for your newborn to take it if the mom doesn't have hepatitis. These are facts that are absolute, and the science is so solid that we should make it the forefront of what we talk about. I think we're winning. I'm not sure why the committee backed away from this, but we are winning the public debate and the scientific debate that there is no indication. They keep saying, well, some people don't have prenatal care. We won't know that the mom has hepatitis or not. Well, they're in the hospital. You're going to give the kid a vaccine because they're in the hospital. That means the mom was there and you could have tested them. There's no argument for even lack of prenatal care why we can't test moms. Almost all the moms are in the hospital. If you're going to vaccinate their kid and try to force the vaccine on their kid, the mom is in the hospital. You can test her for hepatitis. So there is really no argument here in this case. And the other thing about preventing hepatitis is it's probably not just the vaccine. You also give them immunoglobulin or monoclonal antibody against hepatitis. When the mom has hepatitis, you give them both immunoglobulin and you give them the vaccine. It's probably the combination of both that reduces the incidence for the child. But there's no reason to give it. And I think we can win the argument on this. So I think on hepatitis B and COVID vaccine for children, absolutely can win the argument. I think we have stronger argument if someone will look at the research on over 65, where a lot of these people are still taking boosters because they're like, better part of valor. I'm getting older, and people did die who were older. And like I say, if you show me evidence that it reduces hospitalization and death, I'll consider your argument. I probably still wouldn't, because I had a good, healthy dose of God's COVID in March of 2020, and I think I'm okay. But people could make their decision if they wanted to. But I think we need more information on whether boosters actually work. One final thought is the woman from Columbia OBGYN residency who did that disgusting TikTok with a bag of Tylenol because she's deranged about Kennedy and deranged about Trump, and popping Tylenol saying, hey, look at me. She's 8 months pregnant. She ought to be fired, reprimanded, discharged, sat down and had a talking to. Something should happen to her, because being a physician is setting an example. And no matter whether there's an absolute link between Tylenol and autism, we have always told patients when they're pregnant, take the minimum that you can possibly take. Even my wife, we're not afraid of Tylenol or anything, but she minimized, and she doesn't remember taking any Tylenol because her doctor told her, minimize the things you take. I know another person who I'm close to who said his wife has seizure medication. She worked with her doctor. She didn't take any seizure medications, even though there was a risk to her. She and her doctor chose not to, because the rule of thumb has always been to minimize. But this woman who does a TikTok while being 8 months pregnant and an OBGYN resident who ridicules the advice to minimize Tylenol really ought to be fired or reprimanded, because it's just despicable that someone would do that and gleefully, 8 months pregnant, tell other women, oh, just pop Tylenol, there's no big deal. And I guess I should probably end with that's all I'm angry about today. You heard everything I've got. So, but I don't know, Tony, are we doing questions, or what are we doing next?
No, we're just going to go on to the next person. But thank you so much for all of the incredible work that you've been doing. It's just such an important role that you've played, and it's so helpful to the country, to Secretary Kennedy, and to the whole MAHA movement. So just very grateful, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Tony. And also to encourage you, this is the best time in the history of people who want real facts and truth. There's never been a better time. We are winning a lot of these arguments. And I think that there's a lot of progress that can still happen, but you got to hang in there. None of this is over, or none of it's settled science, as they say. We need to keep pushing on, making the arguments, and particularly the idea of studying the COVID booster. We should absolutely study whether there's any evidence, because I think there is going to be no evidence of reduction in hospitalization and death, because I think the numbers are so small, it's going to be hard statistically to show a benefit. But we should fight this, not because we aren't going to take the booster, but because there needs to be some proof, so we're not just enriching companies without good science.
That's great. Yeah, and that's just so critical that we're open to real science, and that we're open to looking at the details and not accepting what we've been told, which is that there's nothing more to look at. And you've made great points that there's always more that we need to look at, always more that we need to study, so that we can get better science. So thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Next up, we have Dr. Joe Ladapo. He's an incredible doctor. He's a researcher. He went to Harvard Medical School. He is the Surgeon General of Florida. He writes for the Wall Street Journal. Just an incredible man, has fought so hard for things that are critical to the MAHA movement, just done great work over the last few years, and has really suffered for that. And you could read the hit pieces that have come out in the New York Times and in so many other places, but he continues to stand up. And I know that all of us listening are very grateful for the work that he's doing. So thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for inviting me, Tony. Always, thank you very much. This is my first call. Now, we're having technical problems here, so I actually can't see you right now, but you guys can see me, I assume?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I'm happy to give a brief update on what we're doing here in Florida. And, as things have evolved, and I have just a tremendous amount of admiration for Secretary Kennedy, and that's only grown since he's taken on this role. And so increasingly, I think of my job as being to to take some of the fire, to provide some cover fire for him, so to be a target for the media to be upset at, so they can, at least for a few moments. So here in Florida, fortunately, we have Governor Ron DeSantis, who's just been a really great supporter for me and really a partner in these decisions that we've made. And we've done a lot of different things, obviously, over the last few years, and we're not done yet. We're planning on. Most recently, one major initiative that we're working on is to end vaccine mandates in Florida law. And that is that's something that it's gotten some attention. It's been very triggering for a lot of people. And of all the things we've done, this one actually, there's been some bipartisan, if you will. So we've actually gotten we've seen both people and people who are sort of more conservative, or whatever you might call it, and more liberal be pretty triggered by it. We're trying to make the case that it's actually a very simple issue, that, obviously, people should not be forced to put things in their body. I mean, it's like not very complicated. And there's a lot of push for this ends justifies the means. People want to see high vaccination numbers. They're afraid that they're going to get sick, other people are going to get sick, et cetera. And I get that, and I understand that. And we've tried to make the case that, first of all, you can still have high vaccination numbers, just like the other countries who don't do any mandates, like Sweden, Norway, Denmark, the United Kingdom, most of Canada, no mandates, really comparable vaccine uptake. But also that, this whole ends justifies the means it's not an ethical position. That really the ethical position here is to give people choice, let them be free to make a decision, and as in a situation of informed consent, which you can't do when you have coercive force in the patient-doctor encounter. So we've tried to make that argument, and we're working hard, and we're going to keep working hard and beating the drum. We've actually been able to initiate the process in the Department of Health to pull back some of the mandates for vaccines that we control within the department, and then there are others that are in statute, and we're working with the lawmakers. And my prayer and my hope is that we are able to do that. I think it would be really wonderful. Something else that we're working on here is the Florida MAHA Commission. So this is really the direction of this comes a lot from First Lady Casey DeSantis. She's extremely motivated in this area, largely from her own experience with breast cancer and the things that she learned through that experience, including just how poisonous so much of our food is, what we call food, oftentimes is not food, and how much in the way of environmental toxins we all consume. And, it's all really in the name of profit. That's how we got here. The people seeking profit, making deals, and putting profit over human health, which people in a free or capitalistic society have a right to do. The government has a role to prevent or disincentivize that position. So we're working on a number of different things. We're testing baby formula here in our WIC program in Florida. We're testing some other common foods that children eat. We're actually doing some work also with testing water and air in Florida in relation to potential geoengineering and potential health impacts of that. And we have a number of other projects that we're working on. So yeah, it's a good place to be. I'm very grateful for Governor DeSantis for giving me the flexibility to pursue what I think is important. Very grateful for Secretary Kennedy and for the people on this call who've been working hard, often many years before I even became aware of all the corruption that we're literally bathing in every day. And we hopefully have some more fun surprises up our sleeve before the end of the DeSantis administration.
Thanks so much, Joe. Yeah, and I think that it's, even though you started later than many of the people on this call, I think you're learning incredibly fast, and that you've been sort of done more help for the country than I think any attorney, or, surgeon general in any state in the country. So definitely you should be really proud, and we're very grateful. So thanks so much. Next guest is Dr. Eric Berg, and he's known as the Knowledge Doctor. He's really been focused on ketogenic nutrition, aiming to combat chronic disease through teaching people, how they can eat better, how they can eat in a way that will really improve their health and make them less likely to suffer from chronic disease. He's also been just a great friend of the MAHA movement, and has come on this call many, many times, but is just a wonderful human being. We're very grateful to have him. So thanks, Eric.
Thank you so much, Tony. I appreciate it. Last week, I talked about something that got a lot of interest, that certain influencers were being paid up to $1,000 a post. So I want to kind of dive into that a little bit more, show you what's behind the scene. It's very interesting, kind of a rapid fire through a PowerPoint slide, if I can pull these up right here, because you hear these attacks on RFK and MAHA, and you think, wow, it's just the regular consumer that's attacking him. And you're going to find out that's absolutely not true. So if we could pull up I think we have the slide right there, right? So let's just kind of go through this right here. If I can, I guess I'll pull up my screen here. Yeah. So traditional media is becoming less effective for industry, big pharma, big food. And so they're switching to other things. So they're using influencers, social media influencers. And the US influencer market right now surpassed $10 billion just this year. I mean, that's like incredible amount of money that's being funneled to pay influencers to, push your message. The influencer market has gotten much better ROI, like by 11 times. So return on investment, you get a lot more rather than traditional advertising and legacy media. It's just not working anymore. So everything's going online. Food industry pays influencers, dietitians to shape our eating habits. Emails reveal how Coca-Cola shaped the anti-obesity global energy balance network. So what they've done is they're trying to give influencers certain messages that distract from high fructose corn syrup and talk about, we're just got to focus on, energy balance, a balanced diet, everything in moderation. There is no bad food. You just need to exercise more. So these messages you probably hear all the time, and now you kind of know where they're coming from. There's a lot of corruption. Influencers are, pushing big pharma drugs. They're getting in trouble. But overall, big pharma, and not to mention other, like even big food, is at their all-time low in trust. It's like 38%. So why is that? Why don't they trust pharma anymore? Well, this is an interesting website I found, Violation Tracker Industry Summary page. Since 2000, over $125 billion were paid in penalties for criminal actions, safety issues, marketing drugs illegally. I mean, just all sorts of criminal actions. And so people are finally waking up, like there's a lot of corruption in this area. So they've lost trust. So what's happening now is, especially with big pharma, they're renting trust. So rather than earning trust through consistent ethical actions, pharma companies are engaging in targeted high-cost marketing and public relation campaigns to create temporary perception of trustworthiness. So this is what you can rent an influencer, right? And but at a cost. Now, I do social media. I have ads on my social media. They're not big pharma ads, and they pay. It comes out to like $4.50 per 1,000 views on average. But I just want to kind of reveal how much an influencer can make from big pharma or big food per 1,000 views, between $20 and $25. Now, you might say, well, it doesn't seem like a lot of money, but it adds up, especially if you're doing a post or a video. And what I'm going to show you literally make you fall out of your chair because it's like over the top. If you're an influencer that has somewhat of a channel and you have, a lot of trust in your followers, you can multiply that $25 times 8 to 12 times because the ROI is so high on whatever they're pushing. So that $1,000 post really was for a small influencer. Some of the bigger ones that have a lot of trust can make between $250,000 to $500,000 per post, per video. So that's not $25 anymore. It went up to $330 per 1,000 views. So you can see this is the new cash cow. This is where a lot of influencers are making a lot of money. And you're talking collectively like several $1 billion worth of influencers. This is what you're seeing. And it's not just advertising their products. It's about attacking MAHA, RFK, because RFK and MAHA is against their interests, like debugging things, myth busting, criticizing wellness influencers. You see this all the time. And now you know where it's coming from, and they're getting paid big dollars. Now, there's 40% of them, over 40% of the influencers are not even disclosing this. And this is another violation that is kind of a gray area. They're going to tighten it up by the FTC, but once they're found out, the penalty is $50,000. So you're going to see more and more of these influencers getting in trouble because they're just not disclosing that they're getting paid. Now, I want to play one little clip of probably one of the top influencers out there in the area of health. So if you could play this for a second, just a short little clip.
Compensated by a vaccine company.
He says he doesn't take money from vaccine companies, but according to the government's...
You can pause. So basically what he said is I never get paid by a vaccine company. That's all I wanted you to show you that. But we found records in open source right online that he got over $1 million from a big pharma, Abbott Labs, in 2023, over $1 million. So, and I haven't seen any disclosures too. So I just wanted to point out that the attacks on MAHA, RFK that you're hearing fiercely are not the average person on the street that's complaining. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks so much, Eric. You have done such great work, and we look forward to working closely with you going forward. Next up is Bonnie Hari. She's known as the Food Babe. She's also, like Eric, been such an incredible part of the MAHA movement from the very start. Has, traveled around the country, has been on TV shows, hundreds and hundreds of times. Really just an evangelist for the MAHA movement. And we're also grateful for the work that she's done, that you've done, Bonnie. And welcome to our call.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that introduction. Thank you, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Today is the 1-year anniversary to the day we marched to Kellogg's to Battle Creek, Michigan, to deliver over 400,000 signatures to Kellogg's headquarters, asking them to remove artificial food dyes. And just in a year, it is absolutely incredible to watch the progress we've made. Not only did Secretary Kennedy take our voices to the campaign trail, he took them straight to HHS and the FDA. And when the FDA announced in April that they were going to phase out artificial food dyes and ask the food companies to do it voluntarily, there was so much pushback on that announcement. But since then, we've received just about probably over 75% of the food industry acknowledging that they're removing artificial food dyes. And, that day, a year ago at Kellogg's, when they had the big sign in their window that said, "Get off our lawn," I just knew that was the spark to our movement, the madness that we needed to really energize everyone on these topics of chemicals in our food that don't belong there, that other countries are not using, that the same food companies that sell us the same product here are using a safer, better for you product in other countries. And Secretary Kennedy and Dr. Marty Makary at the FDA has made this a commitment to address this and to look at these chemicals post-market and to ask the food companies to stop doing this practice. And, what we've accomplished in just that short year is nothing short of amazing. It took 30 years to ban one red dye. We have now effectively removed it from the American food supply, which it'll, slowly but surely all the other companies will have to do it just to compete against the bigger announcements of like Walmart and others doing this. And then, we have other incredible things that are happening that are so exciting at the state level. Arizona, Louisiana, Texas, West Virginia, Florida, Michigan. I mean, there's bills pending in New Jersey and New York and North Carolina and Pennsylvania that all address not only artificial food dyes, but a slew of chemicals that don't belong in the food supply that all have risks to your immune system, the cancer risks, to your allergies, to diabetes, other chronic diseases that we're facing. So there's a tremendous effort at the state level happening, and this terrifies the food companies more than ever. So much so that now there is a concerted effort that is being run by Randy Russell, the Russell Group, who is one of the top food lobbyists in Washington. And they are gathering $1 million per food company to stop this state legislation. So they're building a $30 to $40 million war chest that is going to be used to get senators and congressional leaders to introduce a bill that would make it impossible for the states to have their own laws regarding food safety and food chemicals. And I don't have to explain why that's a bad idea, because the momentum from the bottom up is really what has created lasting change in Washington. We know it takes a long time, no matter who's in leadership, to get things done there. There's a huge bureaucracy happening there. And I'm so thankful we have the leadership we do on these issues in Washington, but they have an enormous uphill battle, not to mention millions and millions of lobbying dollars to go up against. So be on the lookout when the Farm Bill comes out. This is one place that they could possibly put this legislation. They also are possibly putting this legislation that we've been talking about on these calls many weeks in a row, the pesticide liability shield that would prevent any action happening out on the chemical companies that poison our farmland. And so it's really important that we stick together. We let people know that's what's happening here with this. And we need to let the public know that MAHA will not allow this to happen. We will not preempt any state legislation when it comes to chemicals and safety in food. I know my time is up, but I have one more thing that I want to mention. Last week, California passed major legislation to remove ultra-processed foods from schools. And this was sponsored by Jesse Gabriel. Jesse Gabriel was an incredible ally to Callie Means and I. He met with us in California, came to our party. And so I was so excited to support him in this. And obviously it's one of the biggest pieces of action on this idea of ultra-processed foods, removing it from schools altogether. It's going to be a 10-year effort, which is a really long time, but they're going to be defining ultra-processed foods, flavor and flavor enhancers, emulsifiers, artificial sweeteners, and of course, artificial food dyes. But I think what really was something that really disappointed me was when Jesse was given the opportunity to give a comment to the public on the MAHA movement, he decided to throw a punch at us. And he just decided that to make it more about California and say that, we've been doing this work all along before there was a MAHA movement. And that California's decisive action is in sharp contrast to the Make America Healthy movement. And, this kind of divisiveness and fight is not with each other, right? It's not between Democrats and Republicans or states, California versus Washington or anything like that, right? It's really about the chemical and food companies that continue to poison us. And so I was very disappointed to see those comments, considering, he reached out to us, came to our party, was giving us really positive feedback and comments to me and Callie, which Callie's not here today right now, but, I was really disappointed to see that. And if for some reason this gets back to him, I hope he knows that we're on the same fight. This is the fight to better, safer food for our children. This is to help reduce the chronic disease epidemic. And I truly believe it starts with food. And if we get people good food, we can solve a lot of these issues. Thank you so much, Tony and team. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Vonnie, those are great points. And it really is sad when so many people feel that they have to badmouth MAHA or, fight the incredible work that you've been doing, that Callie's been doing, that, Bobby's been doing, and that the whole MAHA movement has been fighting for, because that really is for all of us. It's clearly not about left or right. This is about right or wrong. This is fundamental to our health. The people who were doing it before, they were not succeeding. The things that they did got us to this point where we have 76% of the population having at least one chronic disease. That's obviously not acceptable. We don't want to keep things the way they are. We want people like you fighting to change the status quo. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Gary Brecka. He's, an incredible speaker. He's known as the ultimate human. He's traveled, I think he told me, to 18 countries in 14 days, just doing incredible work, just out there telling people things that are real science, that are helping people become healthier. And that's what we need. We need people like him with millions of followers out there counteracting the big pharma, big food, big ag, who are telling us things that aren't true, and who are willing to spend huge amounts of money to convince the public that the way things have gone in the past are the way that they should continue to go. We know that's not true. Gary Brecka is helping to convince millions of Americans that really just isn't true. So thanks so much, Gary, and welcome.
Yeah, you're super welcome. I wanted to actually share maybe some positive news. Vonnie, amazing work that you've been doing. You're one of the OGs of the space and sometimes don't get enough credit for really creating a lot of the movement that is really steamrolling today. And the truth is that messages like hers and Dr. Berg's are really beginning to resonate. We have all kinds of metrics that I won't bore you with for, how the audience that we message to, about 209 million views a month, is receiving the information, and whether or not they're taking action, whether they like it, forward it, comment on it, share it, actually view the entire message. And MAHA messages are ranked the highest amongst all of our social media posts. They are the most viral. They are the most consumed. They're the most downloaded. They're the most commented on. They're the most forwarded, and they're the most watched. So make no mistake, this movement is at the heart center of America. And I mean, not just the Americans that are paying attention, but middle America is beginning to wake up. And I think that we have a lot more power than we might think that we have. I think, we should be talking about the influence that we have at the ballot box. What legislators, which one of our politicians are pro-MAHA that are going to vote to against things like House Appropriations Bill, Section 453, that is going to give broad immunity to chemical companies. Who do we have on our side that's at political risk right now that our support might be meaningful to? Because that's where we can circumvent the entire system. Because it doesn't matter what the lobbyists are doing. It doesn't matter what the media is saying. At the end of the day, it comes down to who's voting for what politician. And, I, like Vonnie, like many of you, have been on the bandwagon of more of what God gave us, less of what man makes us. I do see some wins coming through at the legislative level that I think are showing me a shift in the attitude and the optics in our public policymakers. One of which was, on September 22nd, the FDA, actually HHS and FDA officials, announced that they were updating drug labels for something called leucovorin, which is prescription strength folinic acid. It's a nutrient. It's an indication now for children with cerebral folate deficiency and some autism-related symptoms. And folinic acid, which is also called leucovorin, is the biologically active form of folic acid, meaning it just directly enters the body's folate cycle without the need to be converted. And now that we have prescriptions for nutrients, I find that really, fascinating, and I find it very enticing and very encouraging, because we know that when the human body is deprived of the raw material it needs to do its job, this is when disease and pathology have fertile ground. When you give the human body the raw material it needs to do its job, this is when magic happens. We have had in the last 10 years, 250,000 plus or minus patients come through our functional medicine clinic, many of which were children. And the vast majority of these children that had attention deficit disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorders, were diagnosed with mental illnesses or mood disorders. A lot of them were related to lack of movement, poor ability to pay attention, complete assignments, being disruptive in class. What we would do for these kids was very, very simple. We would remove the folic acid from their diet, because about half of the population has a gene mutation that doesn't allow us to process this synthetic nutrient. We would add in things like methylfolate or folinic acid, and in just a week, you would see dramatic changes in their behavior. And sadly, what happens when our kids are over-medicalized is we create a response in the body called tachyphylaxis, which is just the medical term for desensitization. And what happens when you put pharmaceutical compounds, chemicals, synthetics, pharmaceuticals into the body that don't have enzymes to degrade? There's no mechanism for the body to eliminate the waste, and by waste I don't mean stool or urine, I mean cellular waste. What happens is you get these inflammatory disorders. We know that autism is a neuroinflammatory disorder. It's multifactorial, but a lot of it has to do with the lack of nutrients in our food supply, the missing amino acids, the vitamins, the minerals that are depleted from our food supply. It would scare you to look at a soil lineage study done in 1992 and compare it to a soil lineage study done in 2022. The vast gleaning of the fields. And so for me to see these little wins like folinic acid now reaching a prescription strength, meaning it can be covered by Medicaid and Medicare, it can be a front line of defense that doesn't create these tachyphylactic responses in human beings, and especially in children, doesn't give them a reliance on pharmaceuticals, because they don't just desensitize to the chemical compound, they desensitize to the natural nutrient that their body was meant to absorb. The vitamin, the mineral, the amino acid, and very often the neurotransmitter that actually forms the basis of a lot of these mood disorders. So I know that I'm limited on time. I'm going to be respectful of my time, but I am so proud to be a champion of this MAHA movement. I want you guys to know, as someone who did just do 14 cities in 18 days, I was in front of almost 250,000 people in a live format in the last 18 days. Our message is resonating. We actually have more influence than you think. The MAHA movement is like a boulder that is rolling downhill. And I think if we would refocus or redeploy some of our efforts in the capacity of this movement to make meaningful change at the ballot box, we would have our legislators and politicians listening. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks so much, Gary.
Super welcome.
Next up, we have Liana Werner-Gray. She's a nutritionist. She's written 4 books. She had her own kind of health journey from serious cancer. She survived it for the last 16 years, has an incredible detox protocol, has a line of foods. She's inspired many, many people, leads a global movement, and we're very, very proud to have her on and to work with her. Thanks so much, Liana.
Thank you so much, Tony. And hello, everyone. It's such a privilege to be with you this afternoon. I don't have a line of foods yet, Tony, but I love your vision. I do have a supplement for anxiety, but thank you for that intro. And thank you, Tony, for the incredible work that you're doing for this movement. So I've written some notes here because I want to keep this tight in 3 minutes so I don't end up telling you guys a big walkabout story. So for those that don't know me, my name is Liana, and 17 years ago now, at age 21, I hit rock bottom with my health. I had a cancerous tumor growing in my neck. I had Epstein-Barr virus. I had chronic fatigue. I had parasites in my blood. And the worst part, I was absolutely addicted to ultra-processed foods. I was truly a mess. So I decided to heal naturally with a functional doctor and a naturopath. And I chose that because of my upbringing in outback Australia with the Aboriginal people. I knew that it was possible to heal through nature, and this was instilled in me at age 5. from going to an Aboriginal school. So after I healed, I started a blog called The Earth Diet, which went viral, which ended up to the Australian press calling me a quack, and because I believed in natural remedies. And then I realized 70% of my readers were from America. So naturally, I ended up here, and I absolutely love it. And I'm now a dual citizen, and I would not want to be anywhere else in the world than fighting this good fight with you guys, because this does trickle on to the rest of the world also. And I get to do amazing things in this country, like protest at Kellogg's this exact day last year with Vani Hari, who is leading the Food Babe Army. So to me, making America healthy again means giving people the resources to heal. It means us bringing the solution. Most people don't come from the same indigenous rich background that I did growing up in a very natural way. They're born into a system that normalizes ultra processed food and teaches that when you get sick, the only answers are pharmaceuticals or cut, burn, poison. But to truly be healthy, we need to get back to basics and look to the natural things that God created for us. Healing doesn't have to be complicated. We just need to help reconnect with what's real. And just to clarify, I grew up with an extremely natural lifestyle, but in the center of Australia, but I moved away for university, for college. And so that's when I started to indulge in junk foods and fast foods. I would eat gummy bears for breakfast, etc. So I quickly became addicted. And then after 5 years, I ended up with a golf ball sized tumor in my throat. So in the last 16 years as a nutritionist, I've seen more people heal than not. Everything from cancer, thyroid issues, autoimmune conditions, depression, and every health challenge you can imagine, including restoring fertility. I've witnessed where people claim their health, their energy, and their hope. And I've seen people say, when doctors say, okay, you just have a week left to live, get your affairs in order, that are still alive today. So truly anything is possible. I've seen people with stage 4 brain cancer alive today. I've seen women who have multiple children now, and doctors said you will never get pregnant. So our greatest wealth is health. And we can have all the money in the world, but if we don't have our health, we are poor. And what I'm seeing every single day is that people want practical tools on how to heal. They want to see the light at the end of the tunnel. This movement is not only restoring people's health, but we are restoring their hope. If our vision is broad, we will reach people in all economic statuses. The first thing people need to understand is that by their own hand, they can either bring life or death. What they eat not only affects the body, but the mind and mental health too. Every day in the USA, about 1,680 people die of cancer, according to the American Cancer Society. So this is where my focus and my passion really lies. And if we can come up with a cancer prevention board that is in unison, we can roll out education to schools all over America, and we can teach children from a young age, these things are carcinogenic. These foods can help prevent cancer. Imagine the adult lives that we will help save and prevent them from ever getting cancer. Along with chronic health issues, and especially a cancer diagnosis, usually comes anxiety. So I was diagnosed with severe anxiety, depression, and PTSD at 25 years old, and I was given 2 types of drugs, a mood stabilizer and an antidepressant. And thankfully now my mental health is restored and I'm off all pharmaceutical drugs. So 1 month ago, I started the most intense detox of my life. It's 6 months long, so I have 5 months to go. It's designed to remove all of the pharmaceutical drug residue. Also any heavy metals, which I don't have any, I got tested, mold, fungus, and parasites. So before I started this cleanse, I got tested for everything because I'm a big believer in getting all the data. And so the positive news from the test is that my biological age came back 8 years younger, saying that I'm 30 instead of 38, which was great. But I wasn't surprised. Obviously, I'm not surprised about that because I've been eating super strict organic earth diet for 16 years. But the negative that came back from this test, and this is the first time I'm saying this publicly, is that I tested high for DEDTP, which is a toxin from pesticides. This completely shocked me because I only eat organic food strictly. So if I have pesticide toxicity in my blood from eating all these organic foods, imagine what the average person consuming conventional foods for decades must have. So we know that even now our organic farming is contaminated with pesticides from the water, the air, and especially if they are farmed next to conventional farms. So this type of information will cause fear in some, but because we have the solutions, we can help people to detoxify, to rebuild and thrive again, and we can help them leave any fears in the dust. So I think we can all agree too that the two worst things in the American diet are seed oils and refined sugars. They destroy our cells, they accelerate aging, and they fuel inflammation and disease. And thanks to RFK, we have the truth about seed oils now is mainstream news. What's often overlooked is how food affects our mood and our mental health. In my book, Anxiety Free with Food, I share a powerful study that shows that some foods are anxiogenic. They actually trigger anxiety, whereas other foods are anxiolytic and they help to nourish the nervous system and even reduce anxiety. And most people just have no idea that their food could be causing anxiety, depression, and mental fog. And we also must focus on cancer prevention, because if we want to make America healthy again, we need a generation to continue it. If our generation's full of cancer, they're not going to be able to create an amazing nation. So I reviewed hundreds of studies and narrowed it down to the top 3 foods that are the most powerful and accessible: liquid chlorophyll, sulforaphane from broccoli sprouts, and apricot seeds, which is the number 1 most demonized food, is apricot seeds. If you Google it, ChatGPT, etc. Well, we know ChatGPT is not, it has its own kind of work agenda. So a groundbreaking Johns Hopkins study found that sulforaphane, the compound in broccoli sprouts, activates over 200 detoxification genes and helps the body to destroy cancer cells while protecting the healthy ones. And then another study that's published on the NIH called sulforaphane as the green chemo prevention, and also added that it's been used now to treat traumatic brain injury, Alzheimer's disease, and Parkinson's disease. The list goes on with how sulforaphane can heal our bodies. Nature just has an abundance of things that can help heal us, and we haven't even nearly tapped into all of its power. So in conclusion, food affects everything: our body, our brain, our fertility, our longevity, our spirit. And making America healthy again means giving people back their hope, their energy, and their freedom through the power of natural healing and a practical, informed, functional approach. Thank you, Tony, and thank you for everyone in this movement.
Thanks so much. Yeah, and it really is an incredible message that we can heal ourselves, we can be cured, we can change our lives based on the foods that we eat, based on changing the foods that we eat, based on changing the things that we put into our bodies, and based on knowledge of the things that we're being exposed to. So thanks so much, and thanks for all the work you do.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Russell Brand. He's a comedian, he's an actor, he's much more than that. He's a writer, he's a poet, he's a thinker. He's just an incredible human being, an incredible speaker. And so glad to be working with him, and so grateful for all the work that he's done for the MAHA movement and all the things that he posts. He's got more than 30 million followers, and it's just been a great friend to all of us. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Tony, for that beautiful introduction and another informative and educational phone call. We were just listening and enjoying it, weren't we, Mabel? I really liked what Lana was saying there. I'm going to follow up on some of that stuff, that you can reduce your anxiety with, what did she say? Chloroform. And she was saying with apricot seeds. Oh man, we got to get into that. I also was, oh no! I've already bought it. We got to have it now. Oh, thanks, Lana. That was pretty amazing. And I enjoyed that was pretty tempting, Lana, when Dr. Berg was talking about how much influencers could earn. Or I felt Satan there. I felt the call of Lucifer on that one. Kellogg's could probably get us to get some dyes back in foods. Hey, I'm going to start a new health-oriented MAHA podcast, and we will once a week showcase people like, if you want to ever come on, Liana, it would be lovely to have you on, or Dr. Berg. We're going to make an highlight and showcase the incredible information available and the wealth of wisdom that's available on this call. I'm very blessed to live in Florida, So I'm already under the covenant of Dr. Joseph Ladapo there. We are medically somewhat free. But since the deepening of my journey with Christ, I've come to understand that the kingdom of heaven is what we must seek first. Deep truth. Where are you going, kid? She puts up with enough of this stuff. You're out of here, are you? You've got to put up with this 24 hours a day. You don't need this rubbish, do you? I've only got 2 more minutes left on the call. I'm not going to be long. But what I want to say is that when the reason that people are worth saving is because we are made in God's image. The reason that we have to be truthful is because we are made in God's image. The reason that we couldn't, oughtn't kowtow to institutions and systems that increasingly look to me like they are satanically led, intoxicating us, denigrating our children, denigrating our health. When Gary Brecker said the human body will be healthy if you give it the inputs, just what I'm putting up with. She's, yeah, go and get it. Go get your, I'm in an iPad negotiation with this kid. I don't like giving him screens, like the screens, it's how Lucifer gets in really, but oh man, it's a negotiation. What I want to, I suppose I'm so sometimes staggered by the contributions of Vani or Dr. Joseph or Liana or Dr. Eric Berg, or even the increasingly handsome and potential future James Bond, Tony Lyons' contributions, that I feel that my best endeavor is to remind us that we're engaged primarily in a spiritual war, and that if we are spiritually healthy, which is very difficult if you're not bodily healthy, then you can participate in this. We can participate into this with much more robustly and effectively. I feel very, very encouraged, and I would echo what Gary said, that we're actually on the precipice of great success and incredible momentum. Whilst these might be very divided and divisive times, where there does seem to be a unity is in our ability to locate truth. We can locate truth now. While there's a lot of talk of misinformation and disinformation, the option of finding out for yourself that you'd be better off to eat, I'll let Liana say it correctly, you're better off to eat, it's not chloroform, is it? You're better off eating apricot seeds and whatever that is in broccoli than you are mindlessly and numbly, distractedly devouring cereals in instances where you'd be better off eating the box than its contents, blithely consuming dyes and sugars and oils that are essentially toxins. Recently I was thinking, the fact that the easy portmanteau junk food has entered into our lexicon and our language. Junk and food have got no business being together in partnership. Junk is something you throw away. Food is something that's supposed to nourish you. The fact that the term junk food exists and has become normalized is an indication of how sick our system must be. What spiritual sickness has been allowed to invade the heart and soul of this nation, that mass toxification, poisoning, and illness would be able to creep to epidemic degrees. When people try to talk about it, they are vilified and condemned. I saw Cheryl Hines briefly on The View, and the kind of jackalish cackling that greeted her attempts to say, well, people can still get vaccines if they want to. People truly don't know that they're engaged in a propaganda campaign. They don't know that they're doing it. But fortunately for us, and I know that Liana knows this, and I know that many of you know this, the victory is already won. Through our faith in him, we will endeavor, we will work. But it's not us that achieves victory. The victory is already assured. And it was lovely to see that kind of confidence in Gary and from Eric and from the many other great contributors to this call. I'm sure that's my time. Tony, thanks for including me, and God bless all of you. And I'm going to start this weekly podcast. Oh, Callie's joined. I see that on the screen. I'm going to get out of here before he unleashes charisma at us. But I'm going to start that weekly podcast, and I'd love to. Tony, will you connect with people that will be good guests? Lots of love to you.
Definitely.
Bye now.
Definitely. Thanks so much, Russell. That was great. It's always great. Next up, we have Dr. Drew Pinsky, a certified doctor, has concentrated on addiction medicine, treated thousands of people over 40 years, runs a thriving practice, has a great TV show, and just an incredible host. He's an author, speaker, really science-based, medicine-based, really wants us to focus on the science. And I think that's a great point that he keeps on making, that, the MAHA movement is accused of being anti-science, but it's anything but anti-science. And we want to engage in the dialogue. And by calling us anti-science or anti-vaccine or conspiracy theorists, that's just a fear of being able to engage in real science and really looking at what the science shows. So somebody who really does that all the time, Dr. Drew Pinsky, thanks so much.
Thank you, Tony. Yeah, I spent 40 years working in a psychiatric hospital and doing general medicine. But as it pertains to science, Jay Bhattacharya said something a couple of days ago very quietly that I want to highlight and reinforce, which is he has figured out a way that quietly nobody noticed, it seemed like, and it caught my attention like a moonshot, which is he is saying he is going to reform scientific publications in such a way that it is not where you get your article published. In other words, if you're published in Nature or New England Journal, that was always considered the gold standard. But I think we all are coming to understand that that has been adulterated by pharmaceutical agencies, money, an editorial process that is highly adulterated, highly distorted. He said, from now on, what is going to determine scientific standard will be reproducibility. In other words, we have been in a reproducibility crisis internationally, where things are, particularly in mental health, which I understood was going to be the focus of today's presentation, where a lot of reproducibility achieves maybe 50%. In other words, a coin flip. And certainly, as both Cooper and Laura pointed out, the duration of those studies were deeply inadequate. So we don't even have the duration sufficient to conclude anything, except that we can do stabilization, which we do quite well. And so I just want to be very clear on the mental health front that we need to make a very distinct difference between serious mental illness, which is life-threatening and disabling, and other forms of psychic misery. In fact, I think Cooper has mentioned the term mental health. In psychiatry and general medicine, mental health practices generally, we have not decided what mental health is. There's no definition of mental health. In fact, I dare you to find a definition of disease out there. I had to come up with my own definition for that, which is something for another day. But understand the difference between serious mental illness, where we can do good, we can use pharmaceuticals, we can stabilize, and then how long we keep people on these medications is a whole other matter. And then this overprescribing, we've got it perfect in our country. We both overprescribe and underprescribe simultaneously. Some people that need it aren't getting it, and people that don't need this are getting way too much, being prescribed by primary care doctors, not specialists. And listen, when Dr. Freud arrived in this country, he was approached by journalists, and they said, Dr. Freud, what do you hope to achieve in America? And he said, well, I hope, I'll use my Freudian accent, well, I hope to be able to one day understand the difference between genuine, true mental illness and ordinary misery. Ordinary misery is good. It's how we build resiliency. It's how we build character. It's how we come to create maximum adaptability. And I would argue that is mental health. And in fact, most non-pharmaceutical therapeutic interventions these days involve, guess what? Exposure. The other thing they involve is interpersonal connectivity. Interpersonal neurobiology is one of the most productive areas of mental health. So relating, exposing and challenging, and then meaning making. Back to Dr. Freud, work, play, and love. That's what humans need. We are meaning-making machines, and we need to be out there making meaning wherever we can. And we do not have an Inspire group of young people today. We must inspire them. We must show them how they can make a difference, how they can go out and reproduce and form relationships. This is a impoverished landscape right now. and using medication is not helping it. And finally, I will just say, medicine's extremely important. And there's good evidence basis for lots of different medicine. I spent the morning working with somebody with a stroke, and I have another patient that just needed a bone marrow transplant. And I myself needed prostatectomy for prostate cancer. And I didn't want my surgeon worrying about anything except that procedure. That's it. I wanted him doing that 24/7. Didn't want to talk to him about nutrition or anything else. We need good medicine. But we have come to a point in this country in particular where we have thought somehow that medicines make life better. Medicines are designed to prevent disabling and fatal illness, period. And if you're using it to make life better, we've gone into a territory that is adulterated, problematic, we should never be in. Making life better is about work, love, and play, and making sure that that work is meaningful. I see my time is up. I will just leave it at that.
Thanks so much, Dr. Drew. So our final guest is Callie Means. Callie has been, at the center of the MAHA movement. He advocates for metabolic health, looking at the root causes of disease in U.S. healthcare. He's exposed a corrupt food system. He's working for the government, has done a terrific job, and is the real leader of this movement right behind Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So thanks so much. Callie, welcome.
Thanks, Tony. And sorry for the bad reception here. I'm just wrapped up some meetings on the Hill. And I'll just be real quick. And just on the topic of mental health, we had a tragic loss, and I'm not sure if this was mentioned on the call, but we had a tragic loss of Nolan Williams at Stanford University, who took his life last week, tragically. And Nolan, in my opinion, is the preeminent researcher on depression and on this new model of mental health that so many leaders on this call and that Secretary Kennedy is trying to move forward, which is, as Dr. Drew and others have said, what we are trying to do is explain that what we are facing, this crisis we're facing, this interconnected crisis of our metabolic health crisis, our chronic disease crisis, our mental health crisis, all of these going up all at once is not a pill deficiency. It's not a shot deficiency. There's clearly something deeper and more spiritual happening. And Nolan Williams, at his perch at Stanford, led the country in explaining that mental health is a deeper root cause disease. He led on testing ibogaine on veterans, creating personalized characteristics of how every brain and every person is different, and how every treatment protocol should be personalized and precision-based, and based on unique characteristics and life events and internal metabolic profiles of what someone's going through. He was, strong supporter of the revolution happening in metabolic psychiatry, understanding how what we eat and the environmental toxins and external factors relate to mental health. And he was going to be a real leader and was a leader in helping Secretary Kennedy and helping HHS think through this. So just an absolutely singular figure and tragic situation that we are all thinking about. And I can tell you, Secretary Kennedy, he just tweeted about it today and is thinking about. But we have a huge, huge opportunity on mental health. And I'd encourage everyone to continue just that momentum of sharing the story of how we need to rethink this spiritual crisis we have in our country. And as everyone knows, it's hard. Secretary Kennedy and the team are warriors fighting through the bureaucracy. Jay Bhattacharya at the NIH is fighting. But there's 70,000 people at HHS. And, many of those people are from the old guard. Many of them are great, but we're trying to reset the culture, reset the personnel to establish this new paradigm. So, as much good momentum out there on the dire need for better mental health for our veterans, for our kids, for everyone, and as much public support for that movement. And I think it really helps what Secretary Kennedy is trying to do. I'd also just reiterate, we're kind of in the shutdown mode right now. There's a lot of preparation happening. I mentioned last time, we're really excited about the dietary guidelines coming up. We're really excited about the state efforts that are happening around the country, medical freedom bills, bills on school lunches, continued improvements to SNAP, getting cell phones out of schools. And I would just encourage, again, everyone on this call, the best bills that have happened in the past year are bills that came from the bottom up. Lawmakers are seeing this momentum that's coming about a new root cause vision of health, and they're coming up with their own bills. And I would just stress to everyone on this call, there's a huge opportunity on the state level to meet with lawmakers, to talk about issues you care about and to get these bills passed. And there's an infrastructure from this group and many others that can add momentum to those bills. And the more bills that pass in the state, I see Dr. Ladapo on and many other state leaders, this tidal wave of state action is unbelievably important on the federal level. We're talking right now about food labeling, about grass reform to, understand what chemicals are in our food. These are all direct results of the fact that so many states have been, passing bills on artificial dyes, have been passing bills on their own labeling standards, not waiting for the government. That gives Secretary Kennedy and gives us leverage, to come to the table and enact much stronger federal standards. So I would just keep everyone focused on, working on the local and state level, where I think there's a lot of impact to push change. So I'll wrap up there, Tony, but I think we're winning. We got to keep pushing every day. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Callie. Yeah, you have really just done an incredible job, and we're all really grateful. So just to wrap things up, I would love it if all the people who are still watching this would go to Substack, the MAHA report, and also go to view the movie that we helped produce, and that is called Toxic Nation at mahafilms.org. And then if you could go to our website at mahaaction.com, you will see our new and improved tracker of all the laws in the country so that you can follow what's going on. You can follow all the changes, all the things worth trying to get involved with on the state level. And we hope that you'll all get involved, that you'll all amplify these messages, and that we'll see you again next time. Thanks so much.
We will not comply with the institution's sick illusion. No, it won't be televised. Welcome to the revolution. We will not comply with the institution's sick illusion. No, it won't be televised. Welcome to the revolution.
The only thing that will save our country is if we choose to love our kids more than we hate each other.